To another crisis overseas, the civil war in Syria. For a ninth straight day, Syrian government helicopters dropped crude barrel bombs on rebels in the country's second largest city of Aleppo and on the surrounding suburbs. Rebel spokesmen say more than 300 people have been killed in the barrel bomb attacks in the past week, while White House spokesman Jay Carney claims the attacks killed more than 300 Syrians just in the past 2 days. For more now, we're joined from Denver by Nader Hashemi. He's director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Denver's Josef Korbel School of International Studies. He's also co-editor of the Syria Dilemma. First of all, what's the U.S. interest right now in getting involved in Syria?
Well, Syria today represents the largest moral and humanitarian catastrophe of the 21st century. I mean, if you just look at the figures, over 100,000 people killed, 500,000 injured, approximately 40% of Syria's population either internally displaced or turned into refugees, and a major part of Syria now is being turned over to Al-Qaeda. So for all of those reasons, I think the United States has an interest in getting involved.
The Syrian peace talks are supposed to get underway in Switzerland in less than a month. The U.S. diplomats are trying to help put that together. Doesn't this bombing campaign simply reflect the effort by President Assad to gain as much territory as possible when those peace talks begin?
Yeah, I think that's precisely what he is attempting to do. Everyone knows that when you come to the bargaining table in Switzerland, the sides, the two combatants, whoever has more territory, whoever can claim to have the upper hand will have a stronger bargaining position. So I think that's precisely why the Assad regime are pursuing the atrocities that we're seeing today before our eyes in Aleppo.
And who do you see having the upper hand in the fighting that's going on right now?
Well, over the last several months, Assad has the upper hand, largely because the international community, led by the United States, has abandoned the Syrian opposition, particularly the moderate democratic Syrian opposition. So Assad is getting stronger, the moderate democratic opposition is getting weaker, and the other party to the conflict, the extremist radical Islamist forces, allied with Al-Qaeda, they're also getting stronger.
Russia has just sent 75 military vehicles to Syria to help them transport out Assad's chemical weapons so that they can be essentially shipped out of the country and destroyed. Don't these barrel bomb attacks, though, demonstrate that getting rid of Assad's sarin gas was perhaps besides the point, so long as he was willing to fight the civil war to the death using conventional weapons?
Oh, absolutely, and that's why he was so willing to give up his chemical weapons, even though, the day before he agreed to give up chemical weapons, he claimed that he didn't have them and he didn't use them, because 99% of the atrocities that have taken place in Syria have been conducted by conventional weapons. So you're absolutely right. The chemical weapons sort of deal was a sideshow. It didn't deal with root causes. It dealt primarily with Obama, I think, saving face because he drew a red line in the sand about a year ago, a red line with respect to chemical weapons. And so he felt that he had to, save face by doing something about chemical weapons, which of course had really nothing to do with the core causes of the Syrian conflict.
As we see these awful pictures come in from the region, there's a huge debate among policymakers about what, if anything, the United States should do. One of America's most experienced diplomats, Ambassador Ryan Crocker, who served in Syria, wrote in today's New York Times that where Syria's future is concerned, Assad is the least worst option. According to Ambassador Crocker, and I quote here, he said, "Assad isn't going. Most likely he will get the country back inch by bloody inch. And do we really want the alternative, a major country at the heart of the Arab world, in the hands of Al-Qaeda?" What's your response? Do you agree with him?
Well, I don't agree with him because these are options that are lying before us precisely and exactly because the Obama administration has refused to show leadership with respect to Syria and has refused to seriously and genuinely back the moderate democratic opposition. So we're left between two very ugly and I think at the end of the day untenable choices, the Assad regime or Al-Qaeda. I think.
So in other words, you're suggesting that we missed the opportunity because, again, the moderates, they were moderates at the beginning, but very quickly there were foreign fighters from Al-Qaeda who essentially joined their side.
Right. Well, some of them joined their side, but I think there was a moderate alternative, particularly the civil society activists, particularly those moderate elements within the military uprising that could have been strengthened and would not have sort of allied themselves with radical Islamists if they had credible backing. So I think Ambassador Crocker's op-ed represents the most cynical and I think short-term and really fundamentally untenable sort of foreign policy positions. But we're at this state precisely because of the failure of Obama's policy on Syria.
Right, but as I read Ambassador Crocker's editorial, he's talking about the realistic situation now, and the reality is that, yes, the opposition is infected with Al-Qaeda, and should we get rid of Assad, we are essentially handing more power to Al-Qaeda.
Well, I mean, that presupposes these are the only two options. I still think there's a third option. I think rewarding someone who's presided over state-sanctioned war crimes and crimes against humanity sends an incredibly bad precedent.
But what is the third option then?
The third option is to reverse policy, to sort of back in a serious way the moderate Democratic opposition and to organize a global campaign the same way that President Clinton did 20 years ago, when for the first 3 years of the Bosnian War he turned away. Then he decided, look, this conflict is getting out of hand. He showed incredible leadership, appointed Ambassador Holbrooke to lead a global effort to bring that conflict to an end.
Well,
so I think that's what's required, a shift in policy by the Obama administration.
I get that, and perhaps there maybe is some third way, but isn't that complicated by the fact that, look, these groups cannot even decide who should represent them at the peace talks that are coming next month. So if they can't identify who should represent them, how can the United States identify who the moderates are in their midst?
Well, I mean, the international community, including the United States, has acknowledged that the legitimate representatives of the Syrian people are the Syrian National Coalition. The reason why there's confusion right now is because that Syrian National Coalition, while strong internationally in terms of the number of countries that have recognized them, they're weak on the ground. So the bickering is a direct response of the very confused and unstable and very sort of ugly turn of events that we've been witnessing over the last several months, where that moderate Democratic opposition and the military forces that are loyal to them are now the weakest party in the conflict, while the extreme radical Islamists are the strongest ones, who don't have any interest in coming to Geneva to negotiate anything. They want to pursue, you know, an armed struggle to the bitter end.
Where do you see this conflict going?
I see it going from bad to worse. All the predictions are that the refugees flowing out of Syria will double by the end of next year. The United Nations just last week said that about 3/4 of Syria's 23 million population will be in need of food aid within a short period of time. So we are headed for, I think, a much darker days, much grimmer days. I think we're going to see Assad getting stronger, Al-Qaeda getting stronger, and unfortunately the good guys, the people who started this uprising against Assad, and the moderate Democratic opposition getting weaker. So I think darker days are lying before all of us.
And as far as the food aid that the United States and other countries are sending in, is that having much impact? Is there a way that the West could be doing this better?
Well, I mean, those are just Band-Aid solutions, right? They're just sort of, feeding people who are hungry. Fundamentally, these people need to return to their homes. There needs to be political stability, and there needs to be a transition to some sort of democratic sort of agenda or democratic track. And of course, none of that is going to happen while the Obama administration abandons Syria, turns away, wants to pivot to Asia. So I think we should not have any hopes that this Geneva peace conference next week is going to lead anywhere. I think we are going to see more bloodshed, more mayhem, more refugees, more wounded.
Nader Hashemi from the University of Denver, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome.